You're welcome.
I'd like to call to order the Monday, January 24th meeting of the Tompkins County Planning, Energy, and Environmental Quality Committee. And looks like we have everybody here. And do we have any public comment?
We do not.
Okay. Let's see, do we have any changes to the agenda? I'm going to ask if anybody doesn't have any. I wanted to ask Irene Weiser, I see here. Are we going to have something different, do you think, than we had talked about?
Yeah, we had originally talked about my giving an overview of about a dozen or 15 pieces of legislation that relate to climate change that are active in the state legislature. But there's a more pressing issue that has come up that I want to give a bit of a briefing on today. And then look to potentially further action next week at the legislative meeting. So
Okay.
it's come up. I will tell you, this is still kind of in very draft form because this is a new issue for me to get up to speed on all of it, and I'm reaching out to some of the larger environmental groups. So anyhow, I don't have specific recommendations yet, but I have some background that I think will be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Brittany, do we need to vote on that if Irene is changing the topic that she's talking about today? She was going to talk about the New York State environmental bills.
No, and you don't.
Okay. Any other changes to the agenda? Okay. Why don't we get the minutes approval? Next, we have two sets of meeting minutes, those from November 22nd and those from December 15th. Would someone like to move those separately, or you can move them individually? Amanda, do you want to move them together?
I would move them together.
Thank you.
I'll second that, Annie.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or corrections on the minutes?
I just have a question.
Randy?
I wasn't obviously at these meetings. Do I still vote or not?
Yes, you are allowed to vote even if you weren't there at a meeting. If sometimes people choose to abstain, and it's totally up to you.
Okay, I review them. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, let's ready to vote then. Okay, Deborah?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so we're unanimous in approving the minutes. Thank you, Brittany, for doing the minutes. Then we have an advisory board appointment. Would someone like to move that? We have from the Water Resources Council, Liz, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Kreitinger. Amanda is moving that. Deborah seconds. Do we need to, would anybody like to go into executive session to discuss this, or are we okay voting on this?
Okay.
I heard somebody say that at a meeting, and it's always good to ask, just in case. And it's also good to remind folks if they wanted to talk about a particular person being appointed, we often we could go into executive session. Let's see. Let's vote on that. Deborah?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So that's unanimous on approving the advisory board appointment. And so for the chair's report, I just had a couple of things here I want to let you know about. As we're having, I don't know if she's going to make it today, but for the case annual report, Sarah Culado, who's the chair of the case board, was going to try and be here today. Irene Weiser, by the way, was just voted in as the vice chair for that group. And I just wanted to say that I always appreciate more. Oh, here's Sarah right there. So when we get to that, hi, Sarah. So when we get to that, I'm always appreciative of the boards coming to let us know what they're working on and finding out how we can support them and vice versa. And we'll also be looking, Greg and I, Greg Mezzi, legislator Mezzi, and I met this morning because he's going to be the vice chair. This committee is morphing into PDEC, Planning, Development, and Environmental Quality Committee, and Greg is going to be the vice chair. So we were talking this morning about the many liaison assignments that we're going to have. So we started to go over some of those. But case board is an important one that I encourage everybody to get involved in. And let's see. So as far as going on into next year, a lot of times committees will, the last couple of years, they've talked about their goals for the committee. I really see it that we've provided a lot of guidance for our various departments over the years. And I really see that as our role. It's not to micromanage the departments. Our departments have their own work plans, which some of them will be coming to us and reviewing the work plans for the year. And to that end, Greg and I are going to meet next week with Katie Bargella and Megan. Oh my gosh, what's Megan's last name?
McDonald.
McDonald, thank you. So we're going to be meeting with them to talk about, they have a draft of their work plan for next year. So we want to, again, see where they're at and figure out how we can support them. And so I don't know if anybody knows this, but this was a question I had coming up, and maybe it would be more for administration, but I know we had allocated some money to Finger Lakes reuse. So I was just wondering if anybody knows, are they going to be reporting to us or coming to a committee, or haven't we figured that out yet?
Annie, I can jump in just by saying I'm not sure what the answer was. I know we had discussions about it, how they would be reporting, but I don't know that has been finalized at this point.
Okay, yet to be determined. Okay, and Katie, I saw you turned your camera on. Did you want to say anything before I went on?
No, just saying hi, and I was gonna correct Megan's name, but somebody got there before I could.
Thank you. You don't have to tell her about that, okay? Let's see. I wanted to just quick review the goals that we had for this committee for peak for 2021. We did review them again, or we did review them in November. So I'll just go through them pretty quickly as I see we have a couple of folks on here. I think we have everybody on here that's going to be, let's see, that's going to be on PDEC. We have Henry, Randy, me, Greg, and Deborah. Is that everybody? I think that's about everybody. So I'll just go through the goals real quick. But if anybody wants to look, that was on the November minutes that we went over those. So one was develop a Tompkins County forest policy regarding the county-owned forest land, and that was achieved. We looked at harmful algal blooms, and that was achieved. And there's a report on that too, if anybody wants to dive more into that. We wanted to track greenhouse gas emissions, and we did that. We wanted to monitor the New York State response to the proposed Owasco Lake watershed rules. One of the reasons, correct me, Amanda, if I'm if I'm off on this, but was to see, because we wanted to make Cayuga Lake watershed rules, and they have to go to the state. And so we really are looking, see what happens with the Owasco Lake watershed rules that they submitted to the state, so that we can make our own. Is anything else you want to add on that, Amanda?
Yeah, just that part of Tompkins County actually is a part of the Owasco Lake watershed around
Oh, right.
Groton area. So that municipality has a stake in whatever what the state does. So it is related to us.
Right. Thank you. And we wanted to support the planning of an energy summit to be held in 2022. And that goal was not achieved because we were not sure if that's the direction we want to go at this point. So we put that on hold. That was something that we had talked about with the CASE board, the Climate and Sustainable Energy Advisory Board. And the last one was support initiatives toward a price on carbon at New York State and a federal level. And we passed a resolution in support of that. And that's all I had for my chair's report. Any questions on that? Okay, and then I'd like to go over to County Administrator's report. I see Amy here.
Hi,
What have you got
everyone.
for us today?
Just a couple of quick updates, one related to the current committee and then one as you start to morph into PDEC. The first is on the green fleet policy. That's currently in review right now. It will be coming to GO in February and then the full legislature. So soon that will be coming out. So I just wanted everyone to be aware that that green fleet policy is coming through. Also, the Workforce Development Board Director search is underway. The candidate will soon be recommended to the full board, to the county administrator, recommended by the full board to the county administrator for appointment to by the legislature coming probably in the next couple of weeks, because how that process works, where the Workforce Development Board makes the recommendation, the county administrator appoints that recommendation, and then the full legislature confirms that recommendation. There's multiple steps in that process as indicated by Workforce Development. So a couple of new updates there. Otherwise, I think that is all I have relevant to today.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Any questions for Amy? I had one. It's kind of almost a comment because I think I know the answer, but the green fleet policy that will go since Terry Carroll now reports to, will be reporting to F&I. Will that go through F&I and then the legislature?
Because it's a policy, it goes through GO. I don't know if it'll also go to F&I, but it would go to GO and then the full legislature. I'm not sure if it would go to F&I as well.
That was not the plan. The plan was to bring it to government operations and then to the legislature.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting us know that. All right, thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Let's see, then we have from the CASE board, the Climate and Sustainable Energy Board, we have a couple of different things, and they're in order of the CASE annual report, and we have Sarah Coulata here, and then Irene was going to talk about some things, but I'll leave it up to you guys. Do one of you have a pressing time commitment that you need to go first or second?
Nope, I'm fine either way. Might make sense to provide the, kind of the 2021 highlights, and then I want to sort of introduce a little bit more about the board as a set of resource members for the PDEC committee, and then maybe Irene could focus in on her content. Is that good with you, Irene?
Sounds perfect.
Great. So in the agenda packet were the highlights of what Case focused on, sort of our deliverables for 2021. And I thought this would be helpful for new members to get a feel for how we have been working. You know, we're very aware that we serve at the pleasure of the legislature. So we will go in whatever direction you need and request, but we have lots of ideas of our own and things that staff bring to us and things that other county departments bring to us. So this is just a quick overview in chronological order. And also members of the community bring. So the case of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act was actually brought by the local chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby, who met with us and did a presentation on this federal legislation that would relate to putting a price on carbon, which Congressman Reed is very interested in and has been collaborating, staying informed by the Citizens Climate Lobby. So we got ourselves educated, we passed a resolution in support, and then we had a meeting. Myself and another representative, or two, I think there were three of us all together, met with Reed's district office leader at the time, Allison Hunt. So that was a productive conversation. It also touched a lot on workforce development and the anticipated sort of clean energy jobs that could come to the region. In March, we were requested by TCAT some support related to electric buses. We also were following the Department of Environmental Conservation's greenhouse gas emissions report for the state. And because we have some experts in greenhouse gas accounting, we were able to make some informed comments to DEC. Starting in April, when the city of Ithaca hired Luis Aguilera Torres as the city's sustainability director, and the Ithaca Green New Deal got new life in a big way, like a very clear vision of how comprehensive that commitment of the cities needs to be to deliver. We have been following the progress. Luis comes to about every other meeting and updates us, and we are also, as individuals, a number of us, making ourselves available to him to help move that project forward, because that initiative, it's many projects, that has a big impact on the county. So that's ongoing work. In May, we also submitted a resolution in support of equitable process related to natural gas assets. That was part of a Public Service Commission natural gas planning proceeding. So it gets kind of into the weeds here, but we've got the people on the board who understand the weeds, and we are continuous learners. This was one area where a number of us were learning quite a bit. And that's similar to the June work regarding methane and volatile organic compound emissions in oil and gas operations. It's really related to maintenance and repair, making sure that when there is drilling going on, the equipment is regulated in terms of leaks. And so we submitted some detailed comments there. Then in August, we focused on the big kahuna, the climate action plan for the whole state, from governing us now for the next several decades. And we took some anecdotes, things that had happened in Tompkins County related to electric vehicle charging, on-site solar development, affordable housing, ground source heat pumps, otherwise known as geothermal, as opposed to air source heat pumps, and the needs of local governments, of our towns and villages, to work with the plan that was at that time under development. So we thought that some storytelling, real life examples would be helpful. And so we created a document that summarized those. and represented concerns of constituents in Tompkins County as we understood them. In October, I put this in here where we advocated to continue. We're very grateful that we are continuing, and we're actually expanded from I think we were 7 and now we're 11 members, which, by the way, is a correction to the minutes. Maybe I joined too late for approval of minutes, but I noticed that it listed Case as having only 7 members, and we have 11 members in 2022. Some of you who were on, those who were on peak, not the new members, remember that we developed a green jobs report. This started at the beginning of the pandemic, was a lot of work for all volunteers, and we did the best we could. It was good enough that Cornell's Industrial and Labor Relations School referenced the report in their own, in which they worked with the Workforce Development Board on skills map for Tompkins County. So they took our information related to clean energy occupations, and training programs at the state and federal level for those, and incorporated some of that into their own report. At the end of 2021, we began working a small group, about 3 people on the board, which we sometimes create ad hoc subcommittees to take on a particular topic. That's how the Green Jobs report got developed. And there's a team thinking about town environmental quality review. The issue is that new projects, new development, new construction is off, if it's of enough of a size, it goes through a state environmental quality review, the seeker process. The seeker process is very dated. It does not take climate and energy into account. And the revision of the seeker process will be a long and arduous process, not to be led at the county level. It's, I'm sure, going to end up being part of the whole climate action plan and process. But we feel that there's the possibility of having sort of a model template for towns to adopt if they want to, which provides, subject matter expertise in terms of the types of questions that should be asked, that is reflective of new regulations and policy coming from the state. And so we are, starting to explore that with a couple of people in the network who sit on planning boards, like Joe Wilson on Dryden's planning board. And so it's an initiative that will unfold over time, and we'll keep you posted on that. And then the last thing in terms of research, or I think of it as continuous learning, is we received from our ex officio member, Bob Howarth, an hour-long presentation summarizing key points of the draft climate plan, which was released on December 30th. But since he sits on that, he's appointed by the state legislature to that council, he was able to give us a heads up in advance of the official release. So that's kind of a good segue into what we'll be focused on in 2022. There are 4 months of a 4-month comment period on that draft climate plan. That is a very, very far-reaching climate plan. It's basically how New York is going to achieve its goals related to renewable energy generation, energy efficiency in the building and transportation sector, generating, wind generation, all these commitments that have been pronounced at the state level. This is the nitty-gritty of how we're going to actually achieve that, and it will start to promulgate policy and regulation. So we're paying a lot of attention, looking at it through the lens of how will it impact Tompkins County, what are the opportunities for our county, where's the money, where is program money going to be available that we can apply for or publicize for local municipalities or businesses or organizations within the county to apply for. So that's a big focus for us for 2022. The other thing that I wanted to share, and I did create this as a document, but only today, so it's not in the agenda packet, but I'll forward it on to Brittany for sending out. You know, as I said, we serve at the pleasure of the legislature and to represent all of Tompkins County. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a view of who the 11-member board is, and sort of anonymously, not names and specifics, but just kind of reading through this wealth of experience and knowledge and encouraging members of PDAC to think of us as your personal think tank on climate and sustainable energy, or your personal hold your hand and get you up to speed on a topic that maybe your constituents are asking you about and you're not aware of and you don't have the time. You guys have so many things you have to get, you know, knowledge and understanding of and start to vote on. And so I'm just going to run through what the occupations are, and then I'm going to run through the subject matter expertise verbally. And then we do have a roster of members with names and email addresses and phone numbers, so that if you want to reach out to somebody, and a little bit about, you know, occupation or expertise that was just pulled from all of our applications to the 2022 board. So again, we're here to help, and people are really eager to help. So Global Energy Technology Corporation employees, 2 of them, I'm one of them, I work for Siemens, and I'm one of 3,000 people in New York State and one of almost 300,000 across the planet focused on technology. And my, you know, probably a third of us are focused on energy across the planet. We have a local electrical contractor. We have a local engineering company member. We have 2 members who are very active in nonprofit community organizations. One of our members is a local landlord. He owns multiple multifamily properties, and he's going to be subject to a lot of these new regulations that are coming. We have 3 members who are academics, doing both research and teaching. We have 2 members who are or have been local elected officials, town board members, one retired from town service and one currently active in Danby. We have 3 members who advise state government on energy policy. They either sit on councils or are, you know, submit expert opinions to proceedings at the Public Service Commission, for instance. One of our members works for a utility, works for NYSEG, so we've got that utility perspective. One is a member, works at Cornell Cooperative Extension, and one is has a focus on carbon markets and carbon trading, in particular for the agricultural sector. So we're a pretty, you know, diverse group with a lot of different roles in life. And so our subject matter expertise includes building energy efficiency and electrification. That's kind of our core competency that we started with 2 years ago. We know about microgrids and energy storage. We know about data center energy efficiency and the energy demands of cryptocurrency. We understand about financing large energy projects. That's one of my particular areas, working with Siemens. People on the board are actively involved in construction and contracting. As I've mentioned, we know a lot about policy, both at the state and the local Ithaca level. Renewable energy and large-scale solar siting. So one of our members sits on a state like work committee. I don't know the exact title, but it's focused on the new policy that came out in 2020 related to the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, which is kind of a streamlined process for large scale energy developments, 10 megawatt solar fields and larger, for instance, to very quickly get approvals at the local and state level to start construction. So we have some expertise in that. We understand about the oil and gas industry and how greenhouse gas emission accounting works. We've got agricultural natural resource expertise, community climate resilience, inclusion of marginalized communities. One member focuses on science communications. A number of us do outreach and education. So there's like, you know, if you have a question, if you have a need, I encourage you to come to CASE, me or Irene, or we'll have the roster available, and we want to be helpful in whatever way we can.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Sounds like from the occupations, you must have about 32 people on your board. But if you're saying 11, I will take your word.
You know,
I think
everyone in life
people-
wears multiple hats these days. I know a lot of you do too.
Well,
Are there
great. And that,
Any questions?
yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Is there, thank you for that, that overview of what you guys been doing this year. You've been really, really busy, hit the ground running. And before we get to questions, I want to put a shout out to my colleague, Deborah Dawson, for being instrumental in getting this great board started. So thank you for that. And Deborah Dawson, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, now this board was kind of a brainchild of our DPS and Anna Kelles and Martha Robertson and myself. And, you know, we were trying to put together an exceptional resource because we knew we were headed into this process of transitioning away from fossil fuels and to sustainable energy sources. But the quality and competencies of the people that have sat on this board really way overshot the mark of our ambitions when we put it together. And I can't urge you enough, if you're not familiar with energy issues, even if you are, this is such an amazing resource. I don't think there's any county in New York State that can equal what we've got at our fingertips. If we have questions, please take advantage. Please take the opportunity to be educated by these people. They're extraordinary and exceptional. And I want to thank Sarah and Irene for continuing to lead the group. Their last leader was Terry Carroll, who now works for us. So that's great. But thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Irene. And thank you all the people on the CASE board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I wanted to just add that Sarah touched on this somewhat, but in Tompkins County, we have often been the driver for environmental issues across the state. And a good part of that has to do with the expertise we have here and also the passion that we have here. So you'll see a lot of people on this board, and we have a lot of other advisory boards. So I just want to encourage people to, even if you don't get assigned or or volunteer for an advisory board, you can go to them. We can help you figure out how to get the links to their meetings if you're interested. I know the CASE board and other ones often have educational components to them. So when you attend, I'm always learning something. And I see from Irene here put in the chat. And thanks to Deborah for being our liaison to Peak and County Ledge and for all her support.
Oh, you're welcome.
So one quick thing too on that, Brittany, is that any issue to change that in the minutes from 7 to 11 members?
No, I can correct that.
Okay. And then I had a question that Sarah, for the green jobs report, we haven't talked about that in a while, as far as I know our member here, Dan Klein, he had some questions and stuff, and we were thinking that maybe it would get, revised to get into a final format. Can you talk about what happened with that?
Yeah, I can. We sort of moved on. There were additional details that were requested to be added to the report in order for it to be, I think, officially acknowledged or approved by Peak. And the lead author, it was a collaborative report of like multiple pages. I don't know, it's 50 pages long or something. It has a lot of content, a lot of links. But the lead author moved out of Tompkins County, returned to New York City, was not available to do the work, and none of the rest of us really had the bandwidth or the need. It served its purpose, we feel like, in its current state. So we just let it be in the format that it is. As a volunteer board, it's just hard to find the time to dot every I and cross every T or cross-reference every source. And that's the status of the report. It is available on our website, the board website.
Okay, and what's the your website? Do you know? If we just look up case board?
Staff to tell us how you get there. It's one of the there's an advisory board page, and there's a link on that page. While Irene speaks, I could try to track it down, or Katie.
Yes, Sarah, I can put it in the chat if that's helpful.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Sure.
Thanks, Katie. Deborah, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to mention the fact that things are changing so rapidly on the green workforce development front. I don't know. I think in some ways we were ahead of the curve when Case decided to take this on. And part of the reason I think they did that is because their first year was 2020. And when COVID hit, our advisory boards were told that they had to stand down. And of course, because of that passion you mentioned, Annie, the case board people did not want to stand down. And this was something that they could work on during the first of our long years of living with the plague. But I will say, given the emphasis on workforce development in the governor's budget, given the evolution of this statewide plan to implement CLCPA, given the fact that our community college is now piloting a workforce development and certification program of its own, I think we've kind of already moved beyond what the Case report suggested back then. So it's ancient history. It's only 2 years old and it's already ancient history.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. And it's true that we felt as a board that economic recovery was going to be the number one need and interest, and that needed to start with what are the jobs of the present and future. I think it's still a useful report. A lot of the content is very relevant to what Tompkins Cortland Community College has planned. There's federal funding through the Build Back Better Good Jobs Challenge, which is Department of Commerce, EDA, Economic Development Administration. So there's millions of dollars that TC3 is participating in 2 different applications, one led by the city of Ithaca and one led by NYSERDA. So yes, there's a huge interest. I should have put workforce development under subject matter expertise. I'll add it before I send the document out, because we talk about that quite a bit, and a number of us are very involved in those conversations regionally. So I would say the report has good content, but the recommendations probably are old history at this point. And one of them was adopted, through the Industrial Development Authority. So I still would encourage new members to browse it.
And Sarah, do you know that the IDA passed a local labor requirement? Okay, so we talked about that before. So
that was sort of an outgrowth of the report, because if we want to have jobs here in the county, we need there to be those sorts of policies in place that require local labor.
right. So it's nice to see things, and as was said, you guys, even through the pandemic, even through the worst of it, you guys kept working. And so one of the, wondering if somebody here could clarify, I know on your list here, the last one in December, New York State, you talked about initial orientation to highlights of the New York State draft climate plan. And you talk about the CLCPA. And so just that's one and the same, correct?
Right. So the CLCPA is the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which was passed by the legislature. And the way to execute on that act was to stand up a Climate Action Council to create a draft scoping plan. And Irene's gonna say more about it. So this could be a good way to segue over to her.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Sarah? Thank you so much, Sarah. And we'll turn it over.
Thank you,
This is-
members of
this
the
is
legislature.
This is really helpful. We look forward to working with you this coming year.
Me too.
Irene, I'll let you take it away.
Well, great, thanks. And
And
Sarah, that
maybe
was-
you want, and feel free to, if there's anything else you want to say about yourself and who you are, Irene.
Sure, thanks. I first want to thank Sarah for that amazing overview of what our committee has done. It's eye-opening even to me to hear it all packaged up, and all of the skills and expertise we bring. It's really remarkable, and also to commend Sarah in her leadership of the committee. I'm just now stepping in to be the vice chair, but Sarah has done a really terrific job of bringing forth, the good in all of us and having us work productively. So it's been really, really wonderful leadership. So I want to say hi, especially to the new Not Quite Yet committee members who have chosen to spend some time here today. I'm glad you're here. So I really appreciate your interest in hearing what's been going on and getting up to speed before it's official. So I'm Irene Weiser. I am a member of the case board, and whatever the name of the board was before the case board, and member of the counties and who was it? The county and the IDA, I guess, joint committee on climate and economic development. And so I've been around the block a few times on all of these issues and worked with the legislature and various groups over the years. I stepped down in 2020 from my third term as a town board member in the town of Caroline. And I have for, probably the past 10 or 12 years now, been the coordinator of Fossil Free Tompkins, which is one of the organizations, one of many organizations in our community that works on climate related issues. I think the kind of particular niche that Fossil Free Tompkins has taken has been to focus on policy issues, both locally and at the state level. And we've been active in many arenas at the state. Pointed to a few different, planning and discussion committees there. And I've participated in any number of proceedings as an official party to the proceeding. And I'll talk about that in a minute because I want to find out in what I'm about to talk to you about whether the county would like to participate as a party. So I want to just preface what I'm about to talk about, and I actually do have a PowerPoint to go with it, to just say that this just got on my radar last week on Thursday. So it's a really important matter. It has a potentially direct impact on Tompkins County. It also has broader impacts in state policy. And I have not yet talked with the case board about this. And so I just want to make clear that I'm not representing the case board's position or case board's recommendation as I talk with you about this. You're just getting, you know, unbridled Irene Weiser talking. So buckle up and here we go. I would like to share my screen and it looks like I'm set up to do that. Thank you, Brittany. And so I do also want to just apologize a little bit about the presentation I'm about to give you. I had a rather heating crisis over this weekend and today. And so I've not been home and able to work on this to the extent that I wanted. And so it's a little rough around the edges. There's a couple of chunks that I didn't quite get to. But nonetheless, I hope that you'll find it valuable. So I know it's really weird to see cows and see the name Bluebird, Renewable Energy Petition. Bluebird is the name of the company that is looking to provide a type of renewable energy service to some dairy farms in upstate New York, outside of Auburn. So let me just do one more little thing here to make this gray bar go away so you can see things a little bit better. Here we go. So Bluebird has proposed to the Public Service Commission, they've submitted a petition on behalf of two large CAFO dairy farms. CAFO means concentrated animal feeding operations that are outside Auburn, to capture methane from the manure using an anaerobic digester. That part is already in effect, and they currently use the methane, these farmers, to make electricity for on-site use and to sell the excess electricity into the New York State grid. But now this company Bluebird, and with the cooperation and interest of the farmers, has petitioned the Public Service Commission to instead of using the methane to make electricity on site, they want to put that methane into a truck and drive it to an injection point in the Corning gas system, because they will earn more money putting it into this gas system than selling it as electricity into the grid. And so it's better for them economically, but the problem is it's not better for the environment. And there will be a public statement hearing on February 2nd. So again, very, very little time here to pull comments together and take a stand on this. And so my questions that I'm, just sort of putting out there now, I don't have a specific proposal yet for you, but is for you and, next Tuesday, I guess is the 1st of February, which will be your next meeting, to consider whether you want to take a position at this hearing. And if so, what that petition would be. And I would certainly provide information between now and February 1st for you to review as to potentially a resolution that you might want to submit to the Public Service Commission. And then also whether or not the county wants to become what's called a party to the proceeding. And I mentioned that I've done this before in any number of cases, including I think most notably and most recently, the NICEAG rate case. So there's sort of a couple of different ways to be engaged with the Public Service Commission. And one is in a more casual way that doesn't really give you a seat at the table. You can send your comments in, they get posted, and usually a municipality's comments do get read. But what the county or anybody who participates in that way is not enabled to participate at the table, where there are oftentimes negotiations before a decision is reached. And I want to suggest that it is perhaps appropriate in this instance, because of the potential impacts to the county, that the county might want to become more involved as a party. I'm not an attorney. I've participated in any number of proceedings. There's no requirement that the participation here be guided by an attorney. Honestly, I think that Terry's background and knowledge of this stuff is extraordinary, and that he would be very competent to participate if the county wanted to see that happen. And again, I guess you'd also need to confer with Katie as to whether that's appropriate. But I do want to put these two questions on the table as I go through my presentation here. So on to the next slide, if I can get this thing to listen to me. I want to use this as a bit of a learning opportunity, in recognition that there are some newbies here. And again, really, really appreciated that you are here to cover some of the basics that are you're going to need to be conversant with and familiar with as you serve on the PEAK committee or PDEC or whatever it gets changed back and forth to. So anyhow, we're going to cover most, and again, I apologize for my heating issues. We're not going to get into these two middle things very much, the dairy and agriculture contribution to global warming and RECs. I will mention them a little bit through our talk, but I don't have a lot of stuff worked up on it yet. But we will get into what is the Public Service Commission, what is the CLCPA and their reduction goals, why should we care about methane, what's the big deal about transporting gas on trucks, and then some options. Actually, we don't talk about this very much either. Well, a little bit, it'll come out. But some options in the end for what we might use as comments to the Public Service Commission. So with that, I will jump into some of the topics. So first, to talk about what is the Public Service Commission, and even to distinguish, it's referred to as the Department of Public Service, and that you can see in their web address is DPS. But the Department of Public Service is an executive branch agency that has 7 commissioners right now. They have a full slate of commissioners that are appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate. They serve 6-year terms, and they are the ones that are properly called the Public Service Commission. And they, like the legislature, like anything, are the ruling body. So just to, sometimes you'll see or hear people talk about Department of Public Service or DPS, not to be confused with our own local Department of Planning and Sustainability, but DPS at the state level is Department of Public Service and the Public Service Commission. Their role is to regulate the utilities that provide service on regards to gas, electric, water, steam, telecom, and cable TV. They're not involved with broadband that doesn't also provide TV service. They do have a role in setting elements of state energy policy, and that comes into play in this petition with what to do with the methane and putting it in the grid or injecting it into pipelines. They are closely aligned with NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. The Public Service Commission programs fund a very large portion of NYSERDA's budget. And NYSERDA's job is to advance clean energy innovation and investments. They do an awful lot of research on behalf of the Public Service Commission to help inform the kind of policy decisions that get made. And then in addition, NYSERDA, as you may or may not be aware, also provides funding to help us convert our homes and businesses to convert their businesses to more renewable directions. The money for that comes through something called a systems benefit charge. You may have seen it on your utility bill, SBC. And we're billed a little surcharge on our bill each month that feeds into NYSERDA's budget and then gets used to funnel back to us in, in programmatic support and incentives for various renewable energy and sustainable energy options that we pursue. So the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, this is largely considered across the country as one of the nation-leading climate laws. It was passed in 2019 and established, among other things, a set of goals and a timeline to reach them. Now, what was particularly important about the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act is that it was actually a law. One of the things, if you haven't already learned in being in municipal government, is that plans are not self-executing. They are not, plans are ideas, but they are not official policies to which you're legally obligated. And New York State has had many, many climate plans over the years and energy plans, but nothing that they were ever legally obligated to fulfill. And guess what? It wasn't getting fulfilled. So a big deal about the CLCPA is that it is a law, and the state is under obligation now to meet these goals. They're quite ambitious goals that by 2030, which is just 8 years from now, 70% of our electricity is going to come from renewable sources. And by 2040, 100% of it is going to be carbon free. And by 2030, again, just 8 years from now, we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emission levels by 40% over what they were in 1990. And obviously, they've grown since 1990 till now. So, it's more than a 40% reduction from where we're at now. So it's really a very ambitious plan. And they changed how we measure greenhouse gas emissions. Usually it's just been looking at in-state emissions, but now through the CLCPA, we have to look at the emissions that are caused by our energy use from out of state. So for example, fracking releases a lot of gas in when they drill the wells, and that gas is emitted out of state. We now have to count that as part of our emissions. The gas is emitted not only at the wellhead, but also while transporting the methane through the pipeline system. There are compressors that are needed to pressurize and get the gas to move. And the compressors, by design, have some not really leakage, but venting that is done to help to equilibrate the pressure and get things moving. And so, in fact, methane by design is vented from these pipeline compressors. The other thing that it takes into account is that methane has a very potent global warming potential, much more than carbon dioxide, about 86 to some scientists even say 100 times more than carbon dioxide over the next 20 years. The other significant thing, or another significant thing about the CLCPA, is that it has a very strong environmental justice direction to it, and requires that the benefits from the programs, 35 to 40% of those benefits need to go to historically disadvantaged communities. The CLCPA set up a process to figure out how do we reach these goals. And it included an environmental justice advisory group, a climate action council, and advisory groups to that climate action council. Those advisory groups included transportation, energy intensive trade, land use and local government, energy efficiency and housing, power generation, agriculture, forestry, and actually, it does say that waste management was added as well. And then just transition working group and a climate justice working group. So here's been the timeline for the CLCPA. It was passed into law at the end of 2019, and they were given a year to establish methods for how to measure greenhouse emissions in CO2e. That means CO2 equivalents for all sources, including methane and refrigerants and various other greenhouse gases. That they need to establish what are these targets that we're trying to reach, of 40% by 2030 and 85 by 2050. And then by the end of this year, they had to identify what are the disadvantaged communities and to develop a draft scoping plan for meeting greenhouse gas reduction and renewable energy goals, and to issue a comprehensive greenhouse emissions report using the new methods for measuring greenhouse gas emissions. And so that these goals have been met. And as Sarah mentioned, they have now published a draft scoping plan. So by this year, and I've highlighted in yellow, they are required to hold at least 6 public hearings on the scoping plan. And they have issued an announcement about that. It's a 300-odd page document with another, I think, about 500 pages of appendices, to which public comment is being sought by the end of April. Then the Climate Action Council will return to work looking at those comments and revise the scoping plan as needed. So I highlighted in yellow because one of the tasks that I think our case board will undertake is to review aspects, at least, of the scoping plan. We may not cover all of the topics, and see if we do have any recommendations that we think should be submitted. And if we're able to get it done in time, we would love to seek the county's support and submission on behalf of the county of the recommendations. And by the end of this year, they will be issuing the finalized scoping plan. By the end of next year, they'll take the things that are made it into the final scoping plan and turn them into actual rules for the agencies to promulgate. With the details of what does exactly this mean and how is it going to be measured. There will be public hearings on those. And then by December of 2024, the rules will be incorporated into the state energy plan, or perhaps just authorized by the agencies. So it's a very ambitious project and much needed. I want to turn now to a different related topic about greenhouse gas emissions. We hear a lot about them, and you may have noticed in our community, there's been particularly a lot of interest in methane. And so I'm going to talk a bit about why that is. First, just the basics. To fight climate change, we have to reduce our emissions of greenhouse gases from all sectors of energy use. When I say all sectors, I mean buildings, transportation. Those are our 2 biggest areas. Some of you may be surprised by that. There's more emissions from that than there is from electricity generation in our state. And then farming adds quite a bit of emissions. I think it's about 11% of the state's emissions are from agriculture. We don't have a lot of heavy industry here, and so less from heavy industry And waste also generates quite a significant portion of our greenhouse gas. The half-life of CO2 in the atmosphere is over 100 years. In contrast, the half-life of methane, or CH4, is only about 10 years. But methane has a global warming potential that's 86 times greater than carbon dioxide. And so here's why that becomes important. This is a graph that was put out by NASA back in 2012. So, you know, it's been a while ago. And what I want to orient you to here is on the left-hand side, we have the temperature change. And some of you may have heard that, you know, we want to stay below this 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature change. And the reason for that is that if we go much beyond there, and certainly if we reach the 2-degree temperature range, but scientists now think even in this 1.5, that we start reaching what are called tipping points. And tipping points are like vicious cycles that once they're started, they just keep making things worse. So for example, as the planet warms, and I don't know if you know that the polar caps, you know, north and south, warm more quickly for reasons that I don't really know, but they do. And so there's a lot of what's called permafrost up there. Permafrost is frozen methane. And when they warm up there, the methane melts and turns into, the permafrost melts and turns into gas, and the methane, you know, goes up to the atmosphere, creates more warming, which then creates the vicious cycle of more warming, creates more permafrost melting, which creates more methane release, which creates more warming and more melting, etc. And there are about 7 or 8 different vicious cycles like that. Another one is about the fires that we're already seeing, droughts and fires, that as the fires put more carbon dioxide and soot into the atmosphere, that increases global warming. The global warming increases the droughts increase the likelihood of fires, etc. So it's honestly kind of scary to see where we are at right now. And it's why controlling methane becomes so important. And so with that as background, I'm now going to show you a little bit zoomed in picture of this part of the graph and talk about what we see. So this is, I should just explain that this is historically a timeline of how the temperature has changed over the years. So let me go now to the next slide and zoom in a little bit. I think it's a little bit easier to see. This purple line, this straight line, is the reference line. This is the, if we don't do anything, what happens when? And you can see that by 2030, we cross into this 1.5 degree warming area. And by 2045, we are just about, well, it looks like by 2050, really, that we cross into this danger zone of 2 degrees warming. That's if we do nothing. So this red line shows, what if we just reduce carbon dioxide emissions? How does that change things? And you can see that for quite a bit of the time, it doesn't change very much. It's only after 2045 that the curve really starts to bend. And that's way too late. We're already well into this warming zone. These other 2 lines show what happens if we do CH4 again as methane. BC stands for black carbon or soot, as you know, gets emitted from when we burn diesel trucks and that horrible black smoke that comes out, or forest fires. The Indian cook stoves are a big problem. So anyhow, if we just address those, we delay crossing into this 1.5 zone. And that's why it's really important. And if we not only take care of the methane and the soot, but we also do the CO2 reduction measures, we actually avoid getting into the 2-degree warming, which is really where there's a problem. So that's the theory that was developed back in 2012. Here's a chart that graphs where we actually are. And what can be seen is that we are not only following this reference line, but really above it, which means that we may in fact reach into this 1.5 area sooner than anybody would like and anybody would expect. And so the reason why it's so important to control methane, remember methane's doesn't exist in the atmosphere for as long. It's got a much shorter half-life. And so if we can scale back our methane emissions, we go a really long way towards buying time, hopefully at least 10 years before crossing into the 1.5 to 2-degree temperature range. So now what I want to shift gears to is talk about a part of the proposal that this Bluebird renewable energy company has for the dairy farms. What they want to do.
Irene,
Yeah.
Can I just pause you there? Because that was a lot of information, and I know we don't want to go over too far, but I just wanted to see if anybody had any quick questions for you on all of that stuff. Anybody? Okay, go ahead, Irene.
Okay, no, thanks. That was a good idea to pause there. And just so you know, I've got all of the pictures closed down, so if there are comments, please do stop me again. So the Bluebird Renewable Energy Project that's proposed is to, instead of taking the methane that's produced on site at these farms, produced and captured and used for electricity generation, and I would assume that they also use it to heat the barns and you know, do heat the barns and keep the silos and grains and feeds warm enough so that you don't get mold growing. Anyhow, I suspect that they're using, well, they are using it at least for electricity generation now. I suspect they're also using it for heat. What's being proposed is that instead of doing that, to take the gas that's generated, further purify it. It has to be of a much more purified nature to put it into a gas pipeline. And they're proposing, and there's a lot involved in doing that purification. And then it has to be compressed to be injected into a truck that will then truck the gas. And this is a map of where it would truck the gas from, is these farms that are just outside of Aurora, and would come down, in all likelihood, come down Route 34, through Lansing, through Ithaca, out through Newfield, and then on to an injection point in Corning that puts the gas into a pipeline that is considered an interstate pipeline. And that becomes significant because of, so right now, when you save carbon emissions and you generate renewable energy, the state pays you something called a REC, a renewable energy credit. What the farmers are looking to do is, because the New York State RECs, or renewable energy credits, don't pay as well as if they were to transport the gas and sell it into the international interstate pipeline, it's thought most likely that it's the California version of renewable credits that pay better for renewable gas than New York State does for the renewable electricity put into the grid. So that is why the farmers are looking to do this. The problem is that in having to further purify the gas and then compress it and put it in the trucks and then to inject it at the other end. When you inject it, you have to heat it up again. And there's emissions. There's methane emissions in both of those processes. There's also, whether it's diesel emissions or maybe if the truck is, a natural gas powered truck, but there's still some emissions from that. And then, as we talked about before, with compressors that move the gas through the pipeline, they vent and emit more methane. And so while this is economically beneficial for the farmers, it's not environmentally beneficial to do this. And I see it as a real problem. And this is, now that the CLCPA is in effect, there are ways that I think we should address it. But before I get into that, I want to talk about the pipeline or the transport of compressed natural gas by truck. This is, an emergency vehicle. It's not the kind of truck that transports gas. But so here's some history that we did on this back in, I forget when it was, 2019, 2018, that the Cayuga power plant was thinking that they might convert to burning gas and bringing in some 60 trucks a day filled with compressed gas, because they weren't going to build a pipeline, but they thought if they could truck the gas in, that would work for them to burn gas instead of coal. Well, there was some research going on by mostly some colleagues down in Binghamton, a guy named Bill Houston, and perhaps some others who were working with him to look at what was happening around the state and around the Northeast in these. This is a particular company that was doing a lot of the transport, XNG, but they were transporting the compressed natural gas. And we can see that there were any number of rollovers, including in May of 2017, an incident in Binghamton where there's spontaneous venting of the truck, where they had to close 4 lanes of the interstate. Tip overs, rollovers, collisions with the car, slid off the road, mechanical out of service and got towed, a rollover in Bethlehem, another incident of spontaneous venting in Little Falls, and another rollover in Exeter, New York. This was particularly troublesome. There was a gas leak. They ended up having to evacuate people within a 1/4 mile radius. I've subsequently learned about this Binghamton one, that they also evacuated people there and that the driver of the truck died. So this is a real issue with these trucks. Here's just some images of some of the rollovers and incidents. There's some newer articles online. I didn't have time to snip the headlines and the links, but I'd be happy to send them to you. And here's a report in Pennsylvania where gas leakage occurred. This is the police report. Sustained moderate trailer damage. Load was carrying natural gas. The damage caused the gas to leak out of the container. This is reports from a council member in Otsego, where they've had 2 truck rollovers. One with the site had to be evacuated for a 1/4 mile radius because the gas was leaking. Closed the highway for over 12 hours, causing major delays. And actually, it was really problematic because where the the rollover occurred, they weren't able to easily get to the local trauma center anymore. And so this council member says it's only a matter of time before a more serious incident happens. And then there's, neighbors up and down complain about the noise and the lights and the shaking homes, et cetera, from the truck traffic. So in 2020, I believe it was, there became a study of this at the U.S. Department of Transportation Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. And this is just the letterhead of that. This is the link wherein you guys can use this link to download the recommendations. And just that through these safety recommendations, which honestly were just too much to put into a slide, so I didn't. I'd be happy to send the file of recommendations. But anyhow, this is now, there are recommendations. Again, these are not laws in any way, but they're recommended to operate these vehicles more safely. But I have to keep scratching my head and wondering what the heck is going on at the state, that funding from our utility bills most likely subsidize the anaerobic digesters and generators that are being used by the farm. How is it that New York state policy is so messed up that it's more economic for the farmers to ship their gas out of state versus getting paid for offsetting their emissions here? And what's wrong with New York state policy, and should it be fixed? I would like to get more data from the DEC or perhaps from the farmers and the petitioners, lawyers, basically, about what the greenhouse gas emissions are from doing one versus the other. But as I've described from you, and I've consulted with Bob Howarth on this, and he agrees that there would more than likely be more emissions from transporting the gas than making electricity here on the farm. So, this is I think, points to a real problem in New York State's policy. Before I get to what we can do about it, I just want to say that I'm reaching out to some of the larger environmental organizations. I have a call actually at 3:30 with Sierra Club from DC to discuss this issue. And it's something that they have been working on. Food and Water Watch has also been working on it. I'm trying to reach them as well, and also NRDC. So I'm hoping to connect with some people. It's obviously a very short timeline to respond to this by February 2nd, but I'm hoping to get more input and advice from them, which I would incorporate into whatever resolution I brought to you guys to consider as a legislature. So possible directions in regards to comments, the CLCPA has a provision known as 7.2 that all agencies must consider the impacts of their decisions, impacts on reaching our climate goals before making a ruling. And they must identify ways to mitigate those impacts. At this point, there's nothing filed by the Public Service Commission or the DEC within this docket to do that. I will also be reaching out to the DEC to find out, there's, in addition to the application at the Public Service Commission, they also had to submit something to the DEC. So I want to find out what they submitted and what kind of action the DEC is contemplating, or whether there's a public comment period for that too. The CLCPA also has a clause on leakage, which says that we should not be shipping our emissions out of state. In part, that's intended that we not discourage business activities here and make it, so that a business leaves New York to go somewhere else to set up shop and, just moves their emissions out of New York State. But I think it could well also apply to the fact that we shouldn't be putting gas into a pipeline that's going to ship out of state and cause emissions out of state there. The Public Service Commission, just like any ruling body in the state, has to abide by seeker law, and this PSC should therefore be required to consider alternatives, including the no action alternative, where the farmers continue operating as they are now, generating electricity on site. I think that it's possible to also include some of the safety requirements that PHMSA has suggested, and that we also might want to suggest that the company that's going to be involved in doing the transport should work with all of the municipalities and public safety organizations within those municipalities to develop evacuation plans. It becomes quite significant. It's unlikely, I think, that a truck would tip over by Wegmans. It seems that they're top heavy, and they tip when they're going at too high of a speed, and when they hit curbs are the times that, or if they have to make a sudden stop. So it's unlikely, but I just picture, what if it tipped, someplace coming down Route 13, as you come around the corner and you're over by Purity Ice Cream and Cascadilla Street and all of that. And what if it tips over there? How do you evacuate the people that are shopping at the supermarkets, that are doing all of these things? How do you get them all out of there safely within a half-mile radius of the blast zone if this thing were to explode? So I just think there needs to be a lot of thought given to evacuation plans, and that might be something that the county in particular would have interest in recommending, given that this truck route is undoubtedly going to course through our county. And then it's an open question to me whether we should push for New York State policy change to provide reimbursement for farmers who generate electricity on site and feed it into the grid. And that's part of what I'm going to be consulting with the big green organizations about. So that ends my presentation. I can, I don't know, before I stop sharing, I should probably find out, are there any slides that people want me to go back to with their questions?
I just would like you to send those slides to all of us, if you wouldn't mind, Irene.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll send the PHMSA document too that I just put as a link.
Annie, I have a question. I have a bunch of questions, actually.
Do you guys want me to leave the slides up, or should I come back to being able to look at everybody?
I don't need them.
Yeah, I don't need them either.
And let me
Okay.
just ask Brittany, would it work for Irene to send the slides to you? And
That
you
would be
can send them-
great.
Yep,
And
I
you
can
can
do
send
that.
them to
Brittany.
the current members and then the new members in PDEC?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay,
I'm going to
Deborah.
stop share.
Yeah, so just first, a quick question. You mentioned a February 2nd deadline. What deadline is that?
That is the public hearing date for this petition from Bluebird Renewable Energy to the PSC.
And you just got notice of this Thursday?
I just learned about it. It's not that they didn't file sooner, but the docket at the Public Service Commission, the number of cases they handle is absurd. And I do look at them, honestly, I look every Monday. I have a link in my calendar to go look at all the new filings, and I skim over them. I don't read every single thing that gets filed. And so this was not on my radar. Thankfully, it was on an attentive colleague's radar, and he sent it to me and said, were you aware of this? So
Yeah, so I don't see much chance that the legislature is going to be able to weigh in with anything by February 2nd. I mean,
well,
we're already.
what I had talked with Annie about potentially is that I could, as I get further advised by the environmental organizations that, have more understanding of this than I, that I could draft a resolution to be introduced as a member resolution at your February 1st meeting.
Okay.
So that's, I mean, I realize this is rushed and not ideal, and, welcome to my world. This is what it's like to try and keep up with New York State energy policy.
Well,
Yeah.
so my larger observation is, I guess I'm less concerned about the dangers of trucks running through Tompkins County. I mean, we've addressed this issue in the past. A couple of years ago, I think there was a similar issue. Okay.
Well,
And
but
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
yeah, so there was, and that was in regards to the Cayuga Power Plant.
Right.
We actually had no authority then and have no authority now. The state DOT is the one who allows trucks to travel where they want to, and the state DOT is going to say, yeah, sure, this is fine.
Okay, but so that's beside the point. That was pre-CLCPA.
Correct.
I think my larger concern, and it's something that we've already addressed at Case, is that we have a CLCPA. We know what the legally mandated greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals are, and yet the PSC continues to act as if none of this stuff matters. I mean, I'm far more concerned at the prospect of the alternative to on-site generation of electricity from manure being fed directly into the grid, as opposed to turning it into gas, putting it in a truck, shipping it, 100 miles, and then feeding it into an interstate gas pipeline. I mean, that whole equation makes no sense if we're going to meet our greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals. And yet the PSC seems to act like there is no CLCPA. And I don't know if this is helpful at all. It's just, I see that as a much more serious problem for us than trucks.
Yeah, I fully agree. And what I want to do is to just hear it from some of the big greens, as I call them, the other environmental organizations. I couldn't agree more, Deborah, and that's why I raised the whole thing to say, what's wrong with this picture? It's nuts. It's crazy to me. I have heard Food and Water Watch has concerns that if they subsidize too much these large scale farms, the CAFO farms, that it will just lead to more CAFOs being, that people will start raising cows just to be able to get the money for feeding electricity into the grid. It's a hell of a lot of work raising cows and cleaning up after them. I'm not sure that Food and Water Watch is right about that, but anyhow, I've seen that as a concern that's raised. Believe me, I'm no fan of CAFOs. They cause a lot of other problems that, frankly, that Food and Water Watch works on, including, all the water contamination. So, it's not a trivial issue, but I think they're a little bit, from my view, it's not my primary concern. My primary concern is the potential increase in emissions. It's part of why I want to check in with the DEC, because the PSC is going to say emissions aren't our department, that's DEC.
Except that the CLCPA makes it their department in the sense.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yep. And so that's why I want to push it.
Randy, you've been waiting patiently for a question. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'd also like to thank Sarah and Irene. It's very informative, and it's good to know that there's people with that expertise that I don't have. So thank you. I do have, regarding trucking and Route 13 in Newfield, we've seen the truck traffic increase through Newfield consistently, and it's a constant complaint that people hear, especially after they put the roundabout in. which has seen many accidents, by the way. And how we have had a rollover yet. By the way, all that water drains into Cube Lake by that creek there. So good luck with that. But I have a question on methane, just because I don't know. So the people that are, using that methane to create electricity, is there a lot of waste from burning that? I mean, is there greenhouse gases that are generated, or is it like 10% of the total?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Randy. There are. So burning gas results in predominantly CO2 emissions, right? Carbon dioxide. So it's not without problems.
Right.
Ideally, we don't put much more of either of them into the air. There is new technology out called fuel cells that I don't know enough of the science behind, but it uses, some of them use microbes to digest the methane, and somehow or another they turn it into electricity. And that's as much as I know about that technology. I can read up more on it. But it's still in early stages. It's expensive. I think that these two farms are some of the largest CAFOs in New York State. It may even be worth NYSERDA looking into using the fuel cell technology there. I feel like there's other alternatives that should be looked at.
But they're using anaerobic digesters, which isn't burning, is it?
That's how they concentrate and make the methane out of the manure pond.
Okay.
Out of the slurry of poo. They use anaerobic digesters to help concentrate the methane that then gets siphoned off and put into a generator on site. And a lot of
okay. So they're burning it on site to get the electricity.
Yeah. And also they probably have generation and what's called combined heat and power. They probably also are able to siphon off the heat from it to heat their barns. And as I said, maybe their granaries or something too. So it seems to me most likely to be more energy efficient to do that, as opposed to playing around with compressing the gas, all of which takes energy. It takes some energy inputs to compress the gas, and it takes heat inputs to expand the gas, and and then there's a lot of other energy uses, and really there needs to be a life cycle evaluation, which is well beyond any of our job or expertise. What I would most want to do is to just within public comments to say that this work needs to be done before you give a green flag to allow this to go on. I also, by the way, have understood that this is already happening from a few other farms in upstate New York. And there's a guy who at one point we had looked at to be part of our energy advisory team, whatever it was called at that point, a professor named Kurt Gooch, Gooch, I think, or SH. He's now gone, but I do plan to reach out to the new member of our case committee to learn from her what I can about how we can, perhaps address this. So yeah, it's all new territory, and this was my weekend's work.
And Dan has a question, but before we go to that, I forgot to say something earlier. Irene did. We were in a meeting together late Friday afternoon, and she did mention this to me, this topic, and she was going to try and pull something together so that we could have something out to you guys. So we didn't want, at least Irene and I were trying not to throw all this at you at the last minute, but apparently her heating system failed, so she had a little trouble getting that out. And I'm amazed at what you got pulled together for today, Irene. So thank you so much.
Annie, let me just clarify that as I started getting into this, I saw that I was way in over my head, and I really want to get the expertise of the people at the national organizations. you know, to those of you, you know, for whom I'm a new face, you know, I really try to be grounded and cautious and not extremist in my recommendations to the county. I really try to do the homework and stay in my lane. But I appreciate that, you know, that the work that I've done has been appreciated over the years. So thank you.
It has. Thank you. Dan, you have a question?
Irene, do you have an estimate of how many trucks a day or a week or a month we're talking about?
Sorry, how much, what,
How
Dan?
many trucks per day or week or month on average?
Yeah, they said one truck
One
a day, one
A
truck a
day.
day. So it's not an enormous number of trucks. It's not like the power plant. And what I also don't know, and I may not have an answer on this by next week, is, you know, is this a gateway case that once, you know, it starts happening here that they'll use, you know, that there are going to be other CAFOs that start using the same digester system, and that there becomes more and more trucks and more methane being trucked.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I had a couple questions. One of the things you talked about as far as the dangers and, you know, and to, like, say, to Randy's point, you know, I'm just picturing one of the areas that I drive more frequently, you know, it's like Route 13, you know, out of Ithaca, you know, through Newfield and that roundabout. You know, New York State is really fond of these roundabouts, but they are in some respects, I think, more dangerous. So just trying to picture in that area, you know, like, say, if it's at the roundabout, if there was an accident, you know, that's very close to the heart of Newfield, downtown Newfield. So that's concerning to me. But do you know, as far as, like, say, if it was, because we have trucks driving around now with propane, is I know it's much more dangerous to the environment to have a methane leak than a propane leak. Is that correct? Or other dangers, you know, of something happening?
Yeah, if you're asking, is it, you know, is there a danger and a risk and a concern with propane trucks? I think there is. I don't know that there's the same top heaviness with their vehicles. And I also don't know if the risk of flammability is the same if they were to leak. You know, the other thing is that propane trucks, look, they've been around for a really long time, and, you know, we know their degree of sturdiness and durability. And, you know, if we were having, I'm sure there's, you know, stories of propane trucks that have rolled over the years. If there were problems of rollovers and leakages and you know, evacuations needed, I suspect we would know about it. So, you know, again, I'm not a combustion explosive safety expert to know the differences between propane and methane and the flammability risk, but you know, there have been a number of rollovers where evacuations have occurred and gas leaks have occurred with this. So you know, I'm not able to make a comparison to propane, and you know, I'm here to raise the issues, and I will, you know, do what I can to take lead and direction from you guys. Certainly when it was 60 trucks a day, I was far more concerned than I am at one truck a day, but, you know, at the same time, still the same problem could arise, whether it's one truck or not. So.
Right. I think going back to what Deborah's saying, seems like to me, the bigger issue is what, you know, I won't go back into it, but what she and you have already articulated is this what we want to be doing, you know? Yeah. So Randy, you had your hand up again.
Yes, one last question. There are two very large milking cow farms in our area. Odessa has got a very large one. I think he's got 6,000 head, maybe more than that
Huh.
now.
Wow.
But he dumps all of his, you roughly need an acre for every cow. That's the general rule of thumb.
Right.
So but he's dumping manure in all his fields and in Newfield and maybe in Enfield too. I think that in Enfield it's happening now by another farmer. And they're doing something to manure and they're liquefying it and probably sterilizing it in some way. But they dump it by the inch full on these roads. And so I don't know. I'm curious now about methane. So I'll look into that. I'm just curious how much. And I do know a gentleman down in Canada that I think changed over to this electrification system. I spoke to him in decades. I think he still owns the farm, or his family does. And I'll speak to him. I'm sure he's measuring it. He's a very educated man, and I bet he's measuring a lot of this stuff. So I'll ask him.
Yeah.
I think he's
Great. I'd be really interested to learn more too, Randy. So keep me in the loop as you learn, educate me.
I will. Thank you.
And Deborah, you had your hand up again?
Yeah, Randy raises an interesting point because these CAFOs in southern Cayuga County have been buying up land in North Lansing, farmland, to spread their manure. This has been going on for several years, and it's driven up the price of agricultural land in Lansing. So obviously, it's great if there's something they can do with this stuff other than spread it.
Yeah,
But,
so I don't.
yeah.
So anaerobic digestion gets the methane out. It doesn't, there still are going to be manure solids and probably liquid as well that remains. It's just that the biologic content has been digested in a way that essentially a fancy compost machine to where the manure has been composted and the methane pulled off.
Is there any information, Irene, as to what happens to the other pollutants in the manure, the nitrogen and the other stuff that's bad for the lake?
Yeah, again, this is not an area that I have expertise. I look forward to connecting with the
Not a
woman
cow poop expert.
I'm not a cow poop expert. And for those of you that know me, in my former life, I was a veterinarian. Cow poop wasn't a lot of discussion about cow poop at vet school either. So, but I'm nothing if I'm not learning new stuff all the time. So, I'll look into it. I'll find what I can. Bob Howarth, as you guys know, is a wealth of information as well. And I suspect, and Sarah, remind me of the name of the woman on our committee who's the involved in the cow research at Cornell.
Well, Danielle Eisman is one of the people. I'm also thinking Stefan Yurka will know something because he's focused on, natural resource climate solutions in the agricultural sector. So he'd be good to tap. And then I'm just putting in the chat, Dick Peterson is a NYSERDA consultant. His company is called Northeast Agricultural Technology. He's up at the airport Business and Technology Park, and he consults with farmers on energy management. He's been a consultant for 15, 20 years. And so if you're looking for, local experts, he might have some interesting things to share. I'll put that in the chat.
Okay. Can I bother you to also email it to me? That's like my best filing system. Chats are gone as soon as the meeting's over. And
okay. Yep. Will do.
Thank you. And I should put my email in the chat for everyone too, in case you want to get in touch.
Okay, while you're doing that, does anybody have any other questions or comments for Irene? So there's Irene's email. And if you need it later, you could get it from me or Deborah or several of other of us. So it looks, Irene, you had some things you were asking, and you brought up Terry Carroll's name regarding in the county regarding whether we wanted to be a party to this. Do you want to ask about that again real quick, or does Terry want to say anything about that, or Katie?
Yeah, sure.
Terry,
Ann.
welcome back.
There's Terry. Good. Yeah.
Here's Terry,
We helped
new
him back
dad.
just a little bit.
And congratulations on being a new dad, Terry.
Thank you.
So Terry, I don't
yeah,
know, were
so-
you there for my presentation? I missed it. Whether you were there.
Yes, yeah, I was
Okay.
here.
Okay, great.
So I will say that Terry brought this to my attention, and we figured we would see what was going to be happening and the direction the legislature might want to provide to us as to whether we would want to sign on as a party or not. I will say, Terry is in the role of Chief Sustainability Officer. This isn't exactly his job to focus on trucking through the county, but we don't have another staff person who could be shepherding this work right now. So we wanted to make sure it was something the legislature felt strongly about us taking a role in.
Can I
Deborah
just
or
add
Irene?
that it
Yeah.
may not just be about the trucking aspect, if the county wants to weigh in on the broader aspect, I would welcome and invite that. We do have recognized expertise. The state recognizes this county's expertise on methane emission issues. So whether we want to weigh in with regard to that. The other thing is I do also want to just raise that I've done this on any number of proceedings. I've signed up as a party to the case, and then in the end, I didn't have time or got in over my head, and I didn't participate. And there's no penalty, no harm to join a proceeding and then not weigh in. They don't penalize in any way. So.
Do you have any idea on how much work this would take, to be able to weigh in, or what are you guys thinking? Terry and Katie?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we've had the help of Irene's presentation here to become a little bit more informed on the issue. I read through the petition a little bit over the weekend, so I'm a little bit familiar with what's going on. A lot of it depends on what comes out at the hearing and how amenable it seems like the judge is going to be, whoever, I can't remember who they assigned to it for this. It's hard to tell right now. We could sign on as a party and see what happens, and if it ends up being too much of our time, we might have to just peel back. It's hard to tell at this point.
Deborah?
Yeah, I'm just not sure who should be asking whom what on this particular issue, because I know that at times Irene has been a party to one of these proceedings, and it's really kind of eaten her lunch time wise. I don't know if we should be asking DPS or DPS should be asking us, because I know, Katie, that you're down too. And I know you're trying to put together a work plan, and I know Terry's got a lot on his plate. So I think it just will boil down to a question of who has the time. And if, as Irene says, we could sign up to be a party and then let it drop if it proves to be too taxing. I guess there's nothing lost by signing on, but I don't want you, Katie, or you, Terry, to feel like you have to turn somersaults to keep up with this.
Can I ask a question of Irene? If we did join as a party on behalf of the county, does that change kind of the attention they would pay to, say, the legislature chose to pass a resolution that you were talking about drafting for a member filed resolution in early February? Would it be important to submit it through being a party, or could you just send that to the DPS staff?
Well, the way that you submit stuff to a case is through the docket, and there's a section for public comments. And so if you submit the resolution without being a party, then it's just filed as a public comment. And then there's a separate slot, tab, on their electronic docket for parties' comments. And as I discussed at the beginning, if there were to be a negotiation, honestly, I don't know if there will be or not. They posted this, in my mind, a little bit unusually, that they've said that there will first be the public comments, and following that, a discussion of a procedural conference. So I don't know what the procedures actually are that are going to follow the public comment. I don't know. I don't know what the procedural dimension is. And, I'll learn more. And if Terry's joined or as a party, then we'll learn more together what it is. And again, if it's more than you can do, there's no real obligation. Deborah mentioned, being swallowed alive by being a party. That was with the rate case. It's not the same situation with most other proceedings. Most other proceedings, there's, very little in the way of face-to-face. There's, a filing written by one group, and then others, have a reply date to reply to it. And then, it all gets submitted to the administrative law judge, who makes a recommendation to the Public Service Commission, and then they vote on it. I don't know how much back and forth and really getting into the weeds. What my hope, and I don't know if this is the right pathway to go about it, but my hope is that we could at least raise the question of what the heck's going on with our own state policies, that farmers make better money selling their renewable energy credits to California. And, and what, that we advise that they fix their own policies. And that would then, fall back to an ongoing proceeding that has existed for many years on the value of distributed energy resources and how to value RECs. So, it would continue down those paths, and there's plenty of well-versed environmental groups involved in those proceedings. I'm not saying that the county would need to continue, but if there's a way to to elevate this issue to that, then we should. And I'm looking at the clock, and I see that both your meeting is ending, and I also have a 3:30 with Sierra Club to discuss this very issue with them. So
Last quick question. When would if we were going to sign on, when would that have to be?
that can be done at any time, but presumably before the February 2nd date. And actually, to be officially a party, you need 24 hours for other parties to say, no, we don't want them. Never happens, but just officially by the rules, you can file for party status, and it's gotta sit for 24 hours before it's official.
Okay, well, catch the rest of our discussion on YouTube, Irene, or call me later.
Okay. Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
thank you very much.
For your interest and attention on this. Bye.
Bye-bye. It's 3:30. Can we just go a couple more minutes? Say we'll try and stop in 5 minutes. Is that okay with folks? Brittany, is that okay with you first?
I'm going to
Yes,
say
it is.
goodbye.
Sarah's gonna
Thanks for
go
having
on.
us.
Thanks, Sarah. Brittany, is that okay?
Yes, it
5
is.
minutes? Is that okay
Yep.
with the other members and staff?
Yes.
We'll try and finish up this discussion. So Randy, did you have something else? I saw your hand
No,
up.
I'll yield to Dan. I see he had a question.
Okay. Dan, and then Deborah.
Thank you. So I'll start from my input. I do not think we should go any further with this issue. It is not something that's going on within Tompkins County. I can think of many other things that are going on within Tompkins County that I would like to see county legislature and planning department attention paid to. The issues raised are very interesting, they're important, but they are outside of Tompkins County. And that is really, we should not be putting large amounts of energy into that. So that's my input.
Thanks,
I
Dan.
agree.
Deborah.
I mean, trucks full of methane going through Tompkins County's Tompkins County issue.
One truck a day, one truck a day. There's a lot more
For
propane.
now,
There's a lot more propane every hour going through it.
for now, it's one truck a day. But in any event, I'm not strongly wedded to this one way or another. Although I will say that it is disturbing that the PSC still hasn't figured out there's a CLCPA out there. I guess the one question I had is if we were to become a party to this, whether or not Katie and or Terry would have to do most of the legwork, or whether the case members, and especially Irene and Brian, who seem to be most concerned about this, might provide a lot of the input that would be filed on our behalf.
One of the
But
things
now-
that go ahead.
I'm done.
Well, one of the procedural things that I'm looking at, if it would be preferable to sign on by February 2nd, I see this as something that we should, and we have Amy here, talk to administration. We need to talk more to DPS. We should bring this to the full legislature possibly. And so I'm just looking at time-wise, it doesn't seem like it's going to work. So I just for that, never mind the work with the scope of the work that this would be. So I think Irene also talked about getting other organizations on board throughout the state. So I imagine, as in the past, that a lot of other organizations are going to chime in here. And that does, the state does seem to listen to those groups too. Since it sounds like what I'm hearing that we might not have the will of this committee even, I would just focus on the just doing the possibility of the resolution is where I'm headed right now. Deborah, did you have something else?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's an old hand.
You're an old hand at this. Okay. So how does that sound to staff and the committee then?
I think that's the direction I was going with. The question I asked Irene was that I don't know that us signing on as a formal party really makes a difference if our intention is to pass a resolution and express concerns. And I would just say that most likely our staff would not dive deeply into this issue and provide detailed recommendations. The legislature would hear from its case board and make a decision on that.
Okay, and we don't need thank you. And we don't need a vote from this committee, whether I or Deborah or someone brings forth a member filed resolution for Tuesday, the first, for next Tuesday. But I would just like to get the sense of the committee with, committee members. So I'll be asking, does that sound okay? We'll just look at, I'll look at doing a resolution if that is what looks like they're wanting still, because this is a fast moving target here. Does that sound okay? And we'll not ask the Terry or any of the Department of Planning to sign on or anything else. Randy, does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, so it would go before the whole legislature, you're saying.
Right, and we'd vote on it there. because we're not passing it today.
Okay. Great.
Let's see. Dan, does that sound okay to you then?
It sounds okay to me, except I really hope we do not get an hour presentation again. That was way too much information for the decision we had to make. So I really hope that that's not part of the legislature. And it literally was
Dan.
an hour. It was an hour, I timed it.
Thanks, Dan. I think Amanda's gone. I don't see her on here. Okay, Deborah? Does that sound okay?
I'm fine with the resolution. I would just suggest that you put a placeholder in the legislative agenda package that goes out tomorrow, so that we don't have to go through the rigmarole of getting 10 votes to get it added to the agenda. And I agree with Dan, we don't need another hour on this topic, but I will say that I thought, to some extent, for the benefit of Randy and Greg, and to some extent Henry, because he doesn't come to all of our meetings or Peaks meetings in the past. It's good to have had this presentation because it does provide an introduction for the new members to a lot of the CLCPA and case issues that they might not have been conversant with.
Thank you. Okay, so I think I can do a motion to adjourn unless there's anything else. Raise your hand if you're
Ready to adjourn?
Okay.
See you all tonight at the
Thank you.
at the expended budget committee meeting.
Are you going to be in person?
Legislators at least.
Are
No,
you
we're
guys going in
gonna,
person?
I think it'll be a hybrid, Randy.
Okay. Great.
I'm gonna do Zoom myself.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. We're
Good night.
adjourned.
Yep.
Thank you, Brittany and everybody.
Thank you, Dan.